Hello everyone and welcome to Don't Be Bored. Today I'm back with another designer interview and I'm joined by Andy, the designer of Springsign, a town building and resource management game that I think you're going to want to hear a little bit about. So welcome Andy, please introduce yourself and let us know a little bit about the game.
Hi Oliver, thanks for having me on the show. My name is Andy Mangum. I'm a board game designer from Charlottesville, Virginia, USA. I have been designing games for 7 or 8 years now, actually, but I've only started to do it in a more serious professional capacity in the past 3 or 4 years. Springsign is my first game that I'm bringing to Kickstarter, my first big game. I created a TTRPG back in college. Springsign is an asymmetric town management game for 1 to 6 players. The idea is the players act as town counselors for this kind of rough and tumble frontier settlement. And even though you're all kind of working together to expand the town, feed settlers, fight bandits, kind of keep things running smoothly, it's not a cooperative game because each of the players are simultaneously competing to become its mayor. Something that's special about Springsign is that it can accommodate a very wide range of players. So it can be played with very entry-level gamers who are just kind of starting out their game journey. And it can also be enjoyed, kind of scales up to be a crunchier experience for more hardcore gamers who want a meatier game to really sink their teeth into. That was important for me because I think I have a problem like many hardcore gamers have, which is that I have a lot of friends and family that I like to play games with, but a lot of those friends and family aren't necessarily as into board games as I am, so they need something that's a little more accessible. So I wanted to design a game that had enough meat on it that, say, hardcore gamers could enjoy, but also be able to scale to a more entry-level experience so that, say, someone like me, who kind of introduces my friends and family to board games, could give them a board game that would be accessible to them. Some of my favorite features of Springsign are the changing victory conditions that the game has. The game features buildings that kind of reward the players for fulfilling certain needs in town. And as new buildings come in and old buildings kind of become obsolete, the players will need to adapt to a kind of changing political landscape that will determine how they need to behave to get more popularity to advance their campaigns. Another feature that I'm particularly proud of are the player boards, because like any asymmetric game, the asymmetry comes from the player boards that the players start with. These player boards are double-sided. So one side comes with completely asymmetric abilities, which gives you a very different way of interacting with the game, and they get pretty advanced and pretty crunchy. But on the flip side, there's always an option for a beginner side, which is very streamlined, very accessible. And the fun thing is that both sides are on an equal power level. So at the same table, a hardcore gamer can play an asymmetric player board, while a more entry-level gamer can play with a very straightforward player board, and it'll be a fair match. Springsign is a very dynamic game. There are many opportunities and challenges that kind of arise organically as the players advance the game, not just in the victory conditions, but it's an engine building game, and as players develop engines with particular resource affinities or extra abilities or passive bonuses, the game will really start to change for each player. and makes each game feel very different from every other session.
I think a lot of people are going to be really excited about those unique player powers, those unique boards that people get. And these are the roles of the town council, I believe. Could you explain a little bit more about some of those unique powers? And then also, how was it balancing them as you were designing the game?
So yeah, the asymmetric player boards are one of my favorite features of the game, and they're quite different. The Say we've got a scoundrel character who actually hires bandits instead of settlers and kind of uses them to scam settlers in town. He's kind of a grifter guy. And on the other end, there are cards in the game called Relics, which are kind of the engine building components. They give you extra actions and have extra passive abilities. We've got a character, the Magus, who really cares about those relics, and she can actually use relics that other people have gained. So her engine building capabilities are very expanded. If you are a crunchier gamer, you're definitely going to like that character. We've got 6 characters in total, and they all act very differently. From a playtesting perspective, it wasn't actually that hard to playtest or balance them, because it's just a process of iteration. If at first they were all very imbalanced, but that's kind of how game design goes. But then as we iterated and iterated and iterated on them, they kind of fell into places where they all felt like they had kind of broken abilities, but they all had that. And that's kind of where you want asymmetric characters to, that's how you want them to feel. So, but even though they all feel like extremely powerful in their own specialization, the fact that they're all so powerful kind of helps balance each other out. And the way that this interacts with the beginner side of the player boards is the beginner sides are just a lot more flexible and a lot more friendly, let's say. So they have expanded inventory slots, their actions are cheaper and easier to use, and that kind of helps an entry-level player adapt to changing situations without having to worry about utilizing a very specialized skill set, if that makes sense.
Nothing is broken if everything is really strong, right? So that does make a lot of sense, and it helps keep the fun factor up. Now, you mentioned some engine building within the game there, and I believe there are these things called relics that are going to be part of that system. Could you explain a little bit more about relics, and, well, do you have a favourite one?
I think relics are a big part of where the fun of the game comes from, because they each feel very powerful, and when you use them in concert, you can kind of build insane combos that are completely unique to your combination of relics. Each relic has a passive ability or an action that it gives you, and we try to make them pretty interactive. So we've got relics that unlock new abilities for everybody playing, but they give the owner a reward whenever anybody uses that ability. My personal favorite relic is the lockpicking kit, which I'll share a picture of that somewhere. Lockpicking, what's fun about the lockpicking kit is that it can be used to kind of steal another player's relic. So it's a bit of take that, which I don't usually like, but what's fun about that is that you're swapping the lockpicking kit with the relic that you're stealing. So then the other person can use it to either steal it back or get some other relic. So you've got this lock-picking kit that's kind of traveling around the table. And even though it can be kind of like an, oh man, when somebody steals your relic, the fact that you have that lock-picking kit now kind of opens your strategy up, because you could basically have any one relic that you want from the whole table. And I like those kinds of interactions that let the players play with each other in a not hostile way, even if it can be a bit of take that. It balances out by giving the person on the receiving end some new benefit.
That lock-picking kit really does sound like it will inject some great player interaction sort of around the table as it's passed back and forth. That sounds really cool. Do you have any sort of memories from the playtesting phase that really stand out?
Gosh, that is a good question. I've obviously play tested Springsign so many times that it's kind of hard to pick. I've got a lot of memories of playtests that went really well or went really badly. There was a point very early on in the development where the idea, which was doing very well and very fun, we had to start making cuts because the way a game works is you put in a bunch of mechanics to kind of see what works, and then once you figure out what makes the game fun, you have to start kind of cutting things off to make it more accessible and more streamlined. There was a part in the process where once we started doing that, the game started to kind of not feel quite right, and it kind of lost some of the fun. And I remember for a month or two, the playtest just didn't feel right, and that was very discouraging time. But after we were able to kind of get to a point where the core of the game was completely revealed, we started to be able to add stuff back in that was really working. And then the game just went like whoosh, like playtest went way better. Every session was a lot more fun. I think in terms of my favorite memory, there actually quite recently there was a game that a family was playing of Springsign. As they were starting to get into it and understand how it worked and play and enjoy the abilities, one of the kids, who was probably like 9 or 10, he just kind of looked up at me and he was like, "This is a fun game." And I was like, "Oh, yes." Like, you get a lot of compliments when you've got a fun game from adults and friends and all that stuff, but it feels different when it comes from a kid because they have no reason to lie to you. If a kid doesn't like something, they're going to say, "No, this sucks." But when I get kids that say, like, "This is a fun game," or like, "I really like this," or "Ooh, I really want to do this in Springsign," it's a huge compliment. And I think those are the moments of feedback that really let me know that I'm on the right track. Because if a kid can understand it and enjoy it and get really into it, I'm doing my job right. And Springsign is the product that I want it to be,
Kids can be brutally honest, so I bet that felt good. Do you have any advice for brand new first-time designers?
I could talk for hours on the advice I have for new board game designers, because I made so many mistakes when I was first starting out that I learned how to fix those problems the hard way, and I'm a much better designer for it. So to preface this, I think to a certain extent, you've got to make your own mistakes and learn from them before you can really advance as a designer. Advice is very helpful, but it can only go so far. But I think some of the most valuable learning experiences that I had with Springsign was, one, try to work on more than one game at a time. And I know this is kind of unusual, but what I experience when a lot of new game designers approach me and start talking to me about their game is I'll have this experience where they're telling me about this game and it's their passion project and they've been working on it for years, and it's not very good. And I think that another way of phrasing this advice might be kill your darlings, because I think as creative people, and I've definitely done this, as creative people, it's easy for us to fall into a trap where we get fixated on an idea, and it's like the perfect idea, and we have to do it perfectly, and it's the only thing we focus on. But the truth is that skill and mastery the skill and mastery that you need to really execute that idea, it doesn't come from just doing one thing perfectly. It's kind of impossible, actually. It comes from doing a lot of things imperfectly and learning from those experiences. So I would say don't take it too personally at first when you're starting out on your game design journey. Just try things and have a few projects at once, so that if you have an idea for a mechanic, but it's kind of different from the vision that you had for one particular game, you have another that might suit it better. And that way you're not trying to just make one game perfect and have every mechanic in there or something like that, because it's just not going to work. Also, I'm not endorsed by Crowdfunding Nerds, but check out Crowdfunding Nerds, their podcast. They were a big help just in terms of learning how to market their games. I've listened to their podcast a lot, and like all of their knowledge is available for free on their podcast. So definitely check them out. They were a huge help on my journey. Yeah. Oh, actually, you know what? I thought of one more. I kind of skipped over this because in my mind it's so obvious. But again, a lot of young game designers approach me with their idea, and they tell me that they haven't played a lot of games, which I don't know how else to put this. You're not going to be a good game designer if you don't play a lot of games. You're not going to be a good writer if you don't read a lot of books. You're not going to be a good director if you don't watch a lot of movies. Expand your palette. Learn how to play a great variety of games, and just do that regularly. If you learn a new game every week, you're going to have a much better chance of succeeding as a game designer, because not only will you have an opportunity to learn good mechanics and see what other games are doing, but because you're also kind of testing the market, because you may have had an idea that already exists or is too similar to another idea. So you really want to expose yourself to as many games as possible.
Talking about trying and finding out about more games, where could people go to find out a little bit more about Springsign?
So you can find out more about the game at our website, Springsign.info. We're on Facebook. We have a Facebook group just called Springsign Board Game. We're on Instagram as well, Springsign_game. But all of our links are on our website, Springsign.info. So check us out there. And we're also live on Kickstarter. So just go to Kickstarter and search up Springsign, because we've done a lot of work on our Kickstarter page, and it's really good and very informative, and it's got good gifts and all that good stuff. So check us out there.
Those links will be in the description box downstairs, so you don't have to go and hunt them out. They'll be just there so you can click them. But a little one for fun. What game has the best component?
Best component. Okay. I'm going to go with 3,000 Scoundrels and their sleeve card abilities. In case you're not familiar, what's cool about 3,000 Scoundrels is that it's an engine building game with scoundrel cards that have certain abilities, but the cards themselves are actually a combination of two cards. One is kind of a base that has like half of the abilities on it, and the other is a plastic card that's transparent that has some other half of the abilities printed on it, and you slide both into a sleeve. so that the abilities line up and you get a completely unique card that has a unique combination of abilities on it, and it's just fascinating and it's super satisfying, and I would check it out. It's 3000 Scoundrels. It's the coolest part of that whole game.
That's another one for my list to give a go, so thanks for that recommendation of a cool component. And well, that wraps up today's interview. Thank you very much for coming on, answering these slightly rapid fire questions, and well, giving us a cool insight into Springsign. So thanks again, and the links, as mentioned earlier, will be in the description box downstairs, so you can go and check them out now the interview is over. And until next time, have a fantastic day gaming.